On this episode, I sat down with Gary Vermeulen, who is the founder of WestVac, a dealership for Vac-Con in Western Canada. We talked about the early days of Hydrovac and how he pioneered his way from being a daylight utility contractor to become an equipment dealer in WestVac. Let's get into it.
Some of the stories we can't tell.
You don't get a second chance to make a good first impression.
Now I actually
Now you know me.
Now I know you.
Yeah.
Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Or are you good?
A little louder.
A little louder? How does this sound now? A little bit more? How does that sound?
That's good.
That's the Hydrovac ears there, huh?
There it is.
Yeah.
Mike and I were talking about that.
Hydrovac ears.
Shit happens, right?
So, Gary, at what point, so first off, where do you live? Where are you from?
Well, currently living in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, obviously.
The cold tundra.
At times, very cold.
What is it like now? Is it?
Man, we got no snow, and
No
we're
snow?
like zero.
Is it
Not bad.
so? Is it to the point where it's too cold to snow yet?
I would just say, well,
Because it gets to
interesting.
that point, right?
Well, in Calgary, you get these schnooks coming in, and yeah, snow tomorrow. Next day, nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, melts.
But so were you born and raised in Calgary, or did you bounce around a little bit around there?
Farmer, Saskatchewan,
Yeah. Nice.
milk cows.
So what kind of started you into getting into, not to get into Hydrovacs or combos or Vac-Con at all? What got you into any type of industrial truck, vacuum truck? What kind of sparked that? How did you get into it? What was your deal?
Interesting. So started off actually graduating out of high school, Rosedown, Saskatchewan. Decided to go to be a surveyor, and part of that was moving around, doing oil field, putting in well sites, pipelines, all kinds of different things. When you're doing that, a lot of times you need to require locations of buried structures. And so we started up a company that was specializing in going in and doing location of underground facilities. So an oil company back at the time, like Amoco or Exxon, would have this old facility and they'd have no records of what's been buried. So we started up a company that would go in and actually do as-builts of those facilities by using radio detection equipment, and we would mark out those things, and then we would map it and give them the engineers blueprints so that they could actually design maybe another pipeline to come in.
So you were basically you were mapping the underground infrastructure.
That's right.
So was the first stage of that the radio frequency stuff, and that kind of gave you the baseline of where everything was?
Yeah, we would basically find hopefully all of the buried structures. The missing factor was that you never knew exactly what it was and how deep it was.
So that's where the hydrovacing comes in, is after that point. The radio frequency tells you the coordinates, but not the depth and what it is.
True.
So you got into that side of the business, and where did it? So you started that, and it kind of sparked you and led you down this rabbit hole of getting deeper into the mix with trucks.
So what happened is we had a request from an oil company to go in and do a facility locate, and this was in the early 90s. And so we went in and did the survey, electronic locating of all the lines, used total stations, tied in all that information uploaded into an AutoCAD file, and made a drawing. But at the same time, they wanted to coordinate a Hydrovac to come in and get the depths and whatnot.
Because it would be more accurate at that point.
More information for them to design or to engineer a future install of maybe a pipe or a riser or whatever.
Okay.
So what we ended up doing is we said, well, gosh, this is like a one-call thing. Why don't we start up hydrovacing too? So what we did initially was surveying and line locating and providing as-built. We decided that we should get into the hydrovac business so that when an oil company called, we could do both.
So I'm not a master of any of this by any means. I started off in the construction, actually earth moving stuff, and then I got into the weeds on the Vac-Con side. I've gotten a little bit of a baptism as far as oil fields go in Texas, New Mexico. How different is, are you familiar with the stuff down there compared to how it is in Canada? Because I know it's very cut and dry different in ways, but kind of similar in certain ways, right? Is it the same thing as if I look at Google Earth in this area, is it pump jacks everywhere type of thing, or is it a whole different type of drilling, a whole different type of getting the oil? Is it different?
So in Alberta,
Yeah.
Saskatchewan, but mostly Alberta, very similar to what you see in southern Texas.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it is similar, because I know that we mentioned earlier when I saw you before we went into the bar over there, you were talking about Ruth and how she came to a sales school for Vac-Con, which is basically a teaching event on stuff. And Ruth killed it, by the way. Ruth was our top dog.
I heard.
Who works. So Gary's with WestVac, which is the western half of Canada for the most part. Maybe,
Correct.
how many provinces?
Well, we handle from Thunder Bay West and
Thunder Bay
into
West.
the territories.
So Ruth came down to Houston, and one thing she mentioned when she came into the school, she was like, super easy to fly here because all of the oil guys are flying from Houston to
Calgary. Mostly, yeah.
Calgary. So she was like, super easy to fly in here because and I was like, well, shit, I didn't really think about the similarities of oil fields down in the southern U.S. compared to Western Canada. But it does make sense. But
Same.
I didn't know if there was anything like different methods or anything kind of similar.
Mm-hmm.
So you went through that process. You started this company and you get rolling. Eventually I'm leading to knowing at some point in this time you become a Vac-Con dealer, but you got into the Hydrovac side of things. And were you with any other, did you own other trucks before this? You were
No.
So here's a good question I could ask you. You know Daryl well with Sage?
I would say so, yes.
How did you meet Daryl? So how did that come
So
to
the
be?
story was when we decided talking to the oil companies in Alberta, and then thinking that it would be a very good venture for us to offer both the survey aspect and hydrovac aspect. We booked flights to a competitor, and we went and visited them and talked to their engineers, talked about our concept, and we were a little bit on the fence. So the next day we jumped on the flight and came down and visited Daryl at Vac-Con and started talking to their engineers and the concept, and decided that Vac-Con was probably the best route to go for our application. At the time, Vac-Con was very, very naive,
Yeah.
I would say.
And probably like getting their first steps and everything too. Because this is early 90s or late 80s?
Yeah, 94.
94, okay.
Yeah, so I would say
Mid-nineties.
Vac-Con probably didn't know what hydrovacs were
Right.
back then.
Right. As well, and probably for most of the United States, really, probably, at least, we're in Florida. So at least the Northeast and the East Coast probably wasn't extremely familiar with hydrovacing at the time, for the most part.
Yeah, mostly Alberta at that time.
Yeah.
There was about 3 companies
Mm-hmm.
about the same time as when we first started investigating it. there was about 2 or 3 companies in Alberta that was doing it. One had 1 or 2 trucks. One had about 5. And then that was right about the time Badger first started.
Yep.
And we started about the same time as Badger. Kind of went in a different direction.
Right.
But it was pretty green.
Yeah. So like all this being so new, you were at a competitor and you flew directly from that competitor down to Vac-Con, and you met up with Daryl, and the engineers at the time was probably Steve or Tom Armstrong. Tom Armstrong. So, and they're talking through the wheels and deals of figuring out basically at this point, as far as Vac-Con was concerned, this was really kind of a catch basin truck with high pressure.
For the most part.
Water. Yeah. So you had the vacuum system that you needed to vacuum up the dirt. We were trying to figure out, all right, we need to get a high pressure water system that's just a handgun at this point. These guys thinking back in the day before they're realizing we're digging with this.
Yeah, and I remember the conversation, what's a boiler?
What's a boiler? And nowadays it's almost like, do you want us to put the boiler on, or we just want to send it with an empty space so that you guys can add it on?
Well, initially, when we first got the first trucks,
you were adding them on yourself.
we just said, we'll put the boiler on.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we're talking Green Cove Springs, Florida. We are not used to a permafrost, big, thick layer, first off, or any clay. We've got sand here.
Right.
Which nowadays, I talked to Trevor Gardner earlier today. We're talking about how different it was back in the day compared to now, and how when Trevor was going out selling these trucks, he had a 6-foot telescopic boom. It was on a Ford L8000. I don't even know the terminology.
Sterling.
Sterling chassis. And you had a dual engine fan. You had a dual engine PD. It was pretty cut and dry. And now we've got this long list of options. All these things are different. But back in the day, everything was extremely rudimentary. It was like, this truck digs. This truck cleans sewers. This truck cleans sewers and storm lines. And it was kind of simplistic in a way. As you guys were getting your first trucks, what did you run into where you're like, okay, we know you needed a boiler? Because we weren't used to that. We got sand here in Florida. We don't need any special effects to move the sand. You get water, you got vacuum, you're moving the sand. You guys had a little bit extra twist to things. You need a boiler. So what other things did you run into where you're like, hey, guys, this is freezing? Or,
Yeah, probably the biggest thing is winter recirc. Winter recirc. Glycol systems.
Yep.
Some of the jobs we were doing up in the Yukon or the Northwest Territories, we were parking these trucks out in a winter camp, no shed, no nothing.
Yeah. And
they're exposed.
Well, and at that point too, you winterize the truck, and then it's still cold out, and you try to put water in it too.
So you're air purging.
Yeah.
We'd have a glycol system that we would flood everything with glycol, and then we had a way of using the water the next morning to take the glycol and put it back into the holding tanks.
Yeah.
So we could keep on doing that. It dilutes after a while, but that's what you had to do up there.
Yeah.
I remember a few breakdowns that we'd have to have a parachute and heaters underneath the.
But I'm not. What's a parachute mean? What's that?
So we would get a huge parachute that would cover the
38-foot
truck.
Yeah, you're actually covering.
And we'd put a torch under it to keep it warm.
Oh shit!
In the winter.
Well, it's funny because I think back with CM when I was working with CM in Eastern Canada.
Yeah.
It's not a parachute, obviously, but they had wraps around certain areas of the truck where they're thinking about this is a freeze point, that's a freeze point.
Sure.
We wrap it insulated. But you guys were actually putting a large parachute of the truck with a torch underneath it and keeping everything a little bit warmer than the outside temperature so that it wasn't freezing.
Yeah, true.
So you guys developed these things being on the pioneer side of the whole. I know that you're like earlier, you're like, pioneer, what? I wasn't on but in reality, to us, being here in Florida, the one thing I go back to this. We talked about that sales school with Ruth. One of my things that I teach in this sales school, it's extremely basic. It's the 101 course, what I call it. We're talking about what's a sanitary sewer, what's a storm sewer. Where Ruth might be up here when we're talking about that stuff, when we're talking about option content and the truck and stuff. when we get into the Hydrovac side, the way I teach it to the newer sales guys is like, this started in Canada. This was not something in the States. This started in Canada, and it trickled down in the States, and we realized that this was something that was serious, that is a good way to daylight, pothole, dig in general. I see a lot of videos online where guys are digging these nice, square, perfect holes. It looks like they're on a golf course on turf, right? And it's a perfect 6-foot straight square. It's not always like that, but then you get guys that comment and say like, oh, I could just get that done with my shovel. It's like, okay, this is a different thing. This is exposing utilities. You're in and out, and you're down 6-foot depth. It could be, it amazes people. It could be 3-4 minutes in your day, and you've exposed something. You clean it up, and you're done. It's a different animal. Down in the States, at this point in time, they weren't used to this.
Well, back in the day, up in Alberta, or Saskatchewan, even northern states, when they're putting a pipeline in, and they had to go across an existing pipeline, so they're crossing it, they would have to put coal and straw down, heat it for days to thaw it out, and then hand shovel down to get to the utility.
Because they couldn't damage it, this
Right.
normal technique.
And so back in the day, they still had to do the hand digging. So when the Hydrovac came along, that eliminated the coal, the straw, and it was a much more efficient way of doing it.
And the hours of people.
You're doing it in the moment.
And I know I run into this on some of the jobs that I go on when I Hydrovac, but I'm sure back in the day, even people were thinking about these lines, if they are intersecting, they need to be a certain distance away.
Yeah,
So
about 1 meter is what it is.
1 meter.
Yeah.
So
3
1
feet.
meter, 3 feet. So American terms, we translate. Everybody else in the world says 1 meter. We say 3 feet.
Okay.
So you got to be 3 feet away. But a lot of times when I Hydrovac, these intersecting lines are nowhere near 3 feet.
No,
and
exactly.
it's just like that. It's always like that. But so to make sure I understand this right, before the hydrovacing stuff started, they're getting down to the point where they know something's there. They're laying down the coal and the straw, and they're thawing that area out so that they can come in and hand dig. Now, the crazy thing about that is that you guys are doing this, and you figured out the Hydrovac side, and the states did not figure this out. It trickled down, and there's still people that are hand digging in the States now. Sure. And I'm sure there's still people in Canada that are hand digging here and there.
No.
Not at all.
No.
So completely. So I've been to Ontario enough to sit at a hotel room and look over the freeway and see the Hydrovacs driving back and forth.
Yeah.
It's exponentially more than what you see in most parts of the States. In Boston, there's a lot. New York City, there's a lot. DC, with the data centers, there's a lot. But if you're in South Carolina, if you're in Alabama, there's really not that much. A lot of those guys are still doing some of that hand digging, which is wild.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's going to be a point in time, not to say that it's like mandated by any formal deal, it's just more efficient.
Yeah. Well, it is mandated. You have to hand expose.
You have to hand expose. Yes.
Everything.
Yes.
Right? So
Yep.
whether you do it by shovel or you do it by Hydrovac, it's going to be hand exposed.
And so to put this in, so if somebody's listening and doesn't know what the hell we're talking about, you're using high pressure water and vacuum. And let's say that there's a fiber line intersecting with a water line, or a water line and a sanitary pipe. And we have to figure out where they are, the depth, and the direction in which they're headed in. You can use high pressure water and a vacuum to expose all that information quite easily. You might add something on there that might be a little better the way I say it, but that's kind of how I break it down to somebody that absolutely has no idea what we're talking about. If somebody's on here that is a nurse and they're listening to the VacconJohn podcast for some reason, they're like, hydro excavation, I don't know what these guys are talking about, but I love John so much I'm going to listen.
But it's funny. So another story. So I had a a situation over in Hawaii. Okay, and we had to dig up a water line. Okay, it's only maybe 2-3 feet deep, and they would spend a fair amount of time doing that. And I'm watching the gardener do it. So I went out and grabbed a shop vac and a garden hose. Actually, it was pressure wash, so it was car wash, high pressure wash. And I go to this thing, and I'm using a vac, like an
actual shop vac, yeah.
Shop vac.
Yeah.
And I'm using a car pressure wash system, which would be probably 2,000 PSI maybe, 2 gallons a minute. And I dug down to that water line in Hawaii. And again, because of the roots and everything else there, they couldn't believe how fast I did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Hydrovac.
No.
It was a shop vac.
And
but it's the same.
And a guard hose.
And a car hose. Yeah. But the principle works.
Right.
Right? And so it's a safe way of doing it, and it's quick.
Yeah.
It's
so,
efficient.
and even with that, the garden hose, did you have like a little like handheld thing, or you putting your thumb over it and just wetting it down?
I actually used
a sprayer.
I used a.
So you had
like
a little bit of. So
but
you can do
with a like garden hose.
Yeah, you're wetting it down enough to where it turns into mud and you can
100%.
vacuum it up. Yeah.
The concept is really, really rudimentary. Really,
Yeah.
Right. So, another situation I recall is in Houston. So they have a lot of oil fields in Houston, and in Houston you have caliche. Okay.
I'm not familiar. Okay, clay. Yeah.
Clay.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to dig.
Yeah.
It's gummy. However, I brought a Hydrovac down to Houston from Alberta, and we had a boiler system
Yep.
on the truck, and everybody thought we were nuts because we'd fire up the boiler, and we would use that, and it was 104 degrees,
Yeah.
and we're using a boiler. But what it did is it melted the clay
Yep.
2-3 times as fast.
And it was also probably like 85 degrees out, and people are like, "What is
No, it
this?"
was 104. I remember that.
104.
Coveralls.
Are we talking
Coveralls.
Celsius or Fahrenheit? In Houston, it was just
Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit. So it was just hot.
Yeah,
But
I was steaming. but not-
and temperature outside, it was still hot out, and people are like, "Why is this guy turning the boiler on?"
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're thinking that it's only to break the frost up, but in reality, with the clay,
Melts
it melts it and makes a huge
100%.
difference.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when I was up in Buffalo, New York, and it was the summertime. And they were looking at it as only needing the boiler for that, but they get a little bit of clay up in upstate New York too. It's not to the extent of Houston or not to the extent of the red clay in Georgia and the Carolinas, but they get some clay in upstate New York.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, guys, this is. It's like if you took Play-Doh and put it in the microwave, and after that, it's a liquid. It's the same
Same
thing.
content.
Yeah.
Right.
So we dug the same scenario, dug a hole, and they were amazed because we were using high temperature water at the same time to melt this stuff. And it made this soup. And I was like, doesn't matter how crazy the clay is, you get rocks and all this stuff into it. You're building this soup down there, and the vacuum can do better the more wet it is. So you build this liquid up, you vacuum it up.
Sure.
So it's something that it's funny when I run into guys because you get the guys that are in their niche, and that if you're digging sand all the time, you're never thinking about a boiler, especially in Florida. There's no reason for a boiler. It doesn't get cold enough, doesn't get sticky enough. But then you get these guys where they're in Georgia, where they're on the southeast coast of Georgia, not that bad. You go to northwest Georgia, pretty brutal. You get clay. So you get these different scenarios where the boiler kicking in could make this huge difference, which is crazy to think that something as an option on a truck can make or break the job that you're doing.
Yeah, it's not only for frozen ground.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Vac-Con. Since 1986, the mission of Vac-Con has been to support, design, and manufacture innovative vacuum and high-pressure water cleaning solutions that deliver superior performance in municipal, industrial, and utility markets worldwide through their global dealer network. Today, their family of products include combination machines, industrial vacuum loaders, jetters, and hydro excavators that are used in an array of diverse applications by companies in the construction, oil and gas, mining, safety, and environmental industries. These machines are equipped to handle the toughest of jobs in the harshest of conditions. No matter the industry, Vac-Con's world-class industrial vacuum trucks and trailers are guaranteed to save you time, money, and effort. To learn more or to find your local dealer, visit Vac-Con online at www.vac-con.com. So, kind of reeling it back in here. So, we talked a little bit about your startup there when you got your Vac-Cons. So you went from one factory to another factory, and you figured out, all right, we're going to go with Vac-Con. You met Daryl, you met Tom Armstrong. Mm-hmm. They were talking about the engineering of the truck. You're like, this is a good fit. So what was did you get one truck? Did you get a couple trucks? Because you were working for a contractor at this time, right?
No.
Or were you a dealer?
No. We were not a dealer. We were actually a contractor.
You were the contractor. So you were actually doing the work.
We were doing
because you were doing that radio frequency. You were actually locating things. So did you start off with one truck? Did you start off with two? What was the?
Yeah, we started with one truck, and I remember we did a job for Amico, and it was up in the Fox Creek area in Alberta. Mm-hmm. And some of the challenges up there is that a lot of sandstone, really, really hard, rock.
Yeah.
And we did a pretty good job with it, and within 30 or 45 days, we had so much work that we ordered a second truck, and then it started revolving from there. So in a matter of about 5 years or 4 years, I think we got up to, I think it was 11 trucks.
Oh wow! Okay.
So that was when we first started doing the first truck. I think arrived in 1995, and then we kept buying trucks. In 1998, we were having some challenges with parts, supply, service from the local support in our area up in Canada that was representing Vac-Con at the time. And I remember Daryl and I having a discussion, and I said, I don't know if we can buy any more trucks from you because, we don't have parts available to us, and we don't have the service. Your representation up in Western Canada, they really don't know these trucks. So, we'd like to, deal directly with you, with Daryl, and and Vac-Con.
Right.
And he says, okay, that's great. Let's keep this relationship going. So we ordered another truck, and about a month later, I remember Daryl phoning me and says, why don't you become our representative for Western Canada? That's how WestVac actually started. Yeah. Is because of that relationship.
And what was the time frame here? What is this? Still 90s?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that was 1997.
So 1997 was when Daryl kind of was like, all right, you know what?
We need you.
Yeah, you guys are going to be a dealer now.
Yeah.
So then at that point, you had to kind of shift a little bit because you're doing all these locations. You're like, well, damn, now I got to sell trucks.
Yeah.
Or I have the ability to start making money a different way.
Yeah.
I'm going to start selling some trucks. So what was the shift like? Was it, because being a location guy, shifting to being, all right, I guess I'm a salesman now, and we're going to go out, and I know the trucks like the back of my hand. I just got to figure out who's buying them. We're going to figure it out right now. Was it kind of like work that way, or was it a little bit more?
Truthfully?
Yeah.
I'm going, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I get parts at discounts. I get warranty taken care of in-house.
Yeah.
We're going to be self-serving.
Yeah.
A year later, I hired a salesperson, and we started working on WestVac a little bit.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was self-serving.
You were still doing the same business you had been doing.
It was.
How many people was it called WestVac at this point?
In 97.
And but before
it was Precision Daylighting.
Precision Daylighting was the name, and then as you guys started kind of becoming a dealership, is that when you changed to WestVac, like a little?
Well, we had our service company was Precision Daylighting,
right?
and
then
our dealership was called
name was
WestVac.
WestVac. So
We were self-serving.
yeah. So you had precision daylighting trucks. I'm sure littering the WestVac. Hey guys, we gotta figure this out because it's the same company.
Yeah.
But so how many people you have on board at this point? Like, what was as far as I'm sure you had drivers, operators. You had 11 trucks. So what was the footprint like?
Yeah, I mean, we got up to about 50 or 60.
50, yeah.
From 95 to 2001, 2003. Yeah, we were from 0 to about 50 employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. So as you
WestVac being the dealership side
Right.
of it, I think we got from 1997 to 2004 from 1 to 3.
Yeah. But, and on that side, it stayed thin because really, when you're trying to find sales and service on that side of it, so you got on the other, you can't really run precision daylighting without having guys to drive the truck and run the truck.
Exactly.
So, what was so when you were doing precision daylighting, keeping it on the locating side, did you run 2 guys a truck?
Yeah,
So
2 guys.
And this is kind of a funny question. It might be a little bit of a rookie question, but I think it's interesting. Did you have a main guy? Was the swamper term a term then? You called the guys. You had
100%.
you had a operator swamper.
Yeah, operator and then swamper.
So you had the operator and the swamper, and the swamper kind of wanted to be the operator at some point, or was it kind of like an even keel thing?
That was a carrot.
Yeah. So it's funny because nowadays guys are like, I got my swamper, but we don't call them swampers anymore. It's like, I'm pretty sure we still do because
It's oil patch.
It's oil patch. It's the same
swamper.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny now. You get these water departments, and the guys were like, "We got a swamper." It's like, whoa, okay. Now you guys have leveled up because you got a dedicated hydrovac, and you got a guy that has probably one extra pair of gear here because he's the one that's getting all the mud all over him all the time.
Yeah.
But one thing that's funny that I learned up in Canada was trying to be as clean as possible on a demo. So my whole thing selling trucks, when I go do a demo, it's obviously a little bit harder on the hydrovac side because you get a rocky situation. Sometimes you can't really hide it. You're going to end up muddy unless you're really good. You might be a little bit better with the lance than I am, obviously. But so I'm trying to figure out how to make this thing clean, right? And I had this guy up in Ontario, and he says, "You know what? That's what we're gonna do. We had a turbo tip on the end of it. It's a little bit fatter nozzle. It was a rip saw." He says, "We're gonna cut the tip off the safety cone. You're gonna stick it in the safety cone, start the hole inside the safety cone, and then we're gonna rip it aside, and you're gonna vacuum through it." So then I said, "You know what? It's a good tip." But then I learned really quick. You go anywhere doing that little trick, they're like, "Look at this guy trying to be clean. You can't do that. Don't do that all the time. You just go ahead and start the hole. Just get it done." I'm like, "All right, I'm done with the safety cone thing. I get made fun of too many times."
Well, we've done the safety cone thing.
Yeah.
We've done all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Pie plate type idea.
The pie plate would be like on the lance, right?
Yeah,
like where it's like a little splash guard.
When we're doing a lot of projects, I remember one project we had 5 hydrovacs, and we had to do 2 kilometers, 1.6 miles
Yeah.
of slot trenching. And what we used to use is we'd get a couple bristle brooms, and we actually built a broom box. So you got a steel perimeter, basically, and you had two brooms, bristle to bristle, and then your lance would go inside of them, and then you'd never get any splash.
I had no idea where you're going with the brooms until you said that they were bristle, and you stick. So it's basically the physical splash is the bristles itself coming up through that, and it's not making it through.
Yeah, you wouldn't get wet.
No.
So-
So do you still see people doing that, or is
No.
that's back in the day?
No, that's old school.
That's old school back in the day. That's cool. So, all right, precision daylighting runs in. You're running these trucks. You start off. You got WestVac rolling. You got 0 to 3 employees. So, at what point were you just all in? We're selling trucks. Because now at WestVac, you guys are selling a lot of combos. You're doing the Hydrovac stuff. You got jetters. You guys are running the full Vac-Con line. So at what point were you saying, all right, I'm on the dealer side?
So 2001,
Yeah.
we had was approached by a pretty good size public company, and they were looking for Hydrovacs. And I looked at the opportunity and I said, okay, well, how about just buy the company instead of just buying the Hydrovacs? So the story was actually they contacted our salesperson in WestVac and said, we need some Hydrovacs. Can you supply? I took that lead from my sales guy and decided to contact him directly. And I said, why would you buy, 6 Hydrovacs when you could buy 10 Hydrovacs, employees, business, and everything? And so we actually sold the company in 2001. And then shortly after that, then I started focusing more on WestVac as a dealership.
Yeah. So you were able to kind of, not get out, but you were able to.
It was an exit plan.
Yeah, you had that. And it was actually, that's one of the things where you had something that you were selling. A guy was looking for Hydrovacs. You had them. You had operators. You had the service behind it, because at that point, I'm guessing you were probably saying like, yeah, you're going to buy these. And then when you need parts of service, like, you know who to call. I'm going to help you out, because you knew the trucks like the back of your hand. So that kind of bled into you getting full-fledged into the dealership side.
And we saw in 2001 that Hydrovacs were starting to get into more demand, and competition was starting to rise and everything else. And we just felt that we had a good strategy of exiting before everybody else got in. And, as people get in, it's going to get more cutthroat.
Yep.
So we decided we'd get out when the going's good.
Yeah. Well, and that's the crazy thing about being the cutthroat side of it is on the Hydrovac. I mean, one thing that, Gary, we see in the States, I don't see it as much, at least when I was in Eastern Canada. We have a lot of people that run combo trucks as Hydrovacs. Do you guys get the same thing up there?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the combo trucks we sell have hydro-excavated packages, right?
And it's funny
With boilers.
With boilers.
Yeah.
So you got a combo truck with a hydro excavation package and a boiler. And it's really hard for us to figure out, like, hey, okay, how many people are buying these trucks that are just hydrovacing? Well, I know multiple people that I sell a truck to that are contractors. They buy a combo. They're mainly hydro excavating with it. They might not have any need to clean any pipe, but if they got a job where they needed to clean a pipe, they can. Mm-hmm. So it really is an odd thing, because in reality, that contractor is a Hydrovac company. But if he gets that job to clean a pipe, he can. So you guys still see some of that stuff up there, but you guys have a lot more dedicated Hydrovacs.
Yeah, so what we find is municipalities will buy, municipalities will buy a combo unit with a hydro excavator.
Yep.
And with a boiler, okay? But yet the contractors, for the most part, they go with the hydro excavators. It's more of a niche market. They're focused on excavating, not so much flushing.
I have a question I just thought of. So back in the day when you first started with precision daylighting, I'm guaranteeing that these were front-mounted booms.
Yeah, well, definitely.
They were front-mounted booms.
Yeah.
So I have my thing that I talk about as far as what is the big appeal? What is the big difference? And why do people love rear-mounted booms so much, in your opinion? Because I have my opinion, but I feel like it's kind of almost like, oh, I got to have a rear-mounted boom. It's like, okay, I get it. I'm interested to hear your opinion on what the big deal is.
So what we would promote with the front boom is that we could drive in and position the truck easier. Whereas if you have a rear mounted boom, most of the time you're backing in.
Yep.
So we found that moving in forward and have that telescopic boom was an advantage.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just interesting, because to me, the big advantage of the rear-mounted boom is really two things, in my eyes. If I'm talking to somebody and I'm being completely straight up, one, you get more rotation, so you have more work area. You got 330 degrees compared to 230, ish degrees off the front. And now with our most hydrovacs, you can go below grade with a rear-mounted boom, which is a big thing for a lot of people if you're not going deep, because you can put one pipe on and you're there. Mm-hmm. I just, for some reason, when I'm running the trucks, I'm like, I pull up, I'm working at the front, I take the boom clip off, it telescopes off the front, I dig my hole right there, and I drive around the hole, and I'm done. And it depends on how the job's laid out. But there's, I feel like everybody, it's one of those things where it's like rear-mounted boom, and people see it and they have to have it, but they don't really realize what it's giving them. There's benefits to having it.
Yeah, there's pros and
no
cons.
doubt.
So, the benefit of having the front-mounted boom with the telescopic, boom and whatnot is that, you've got steel. You can telescope it out 10 feet. You've got maybe 10 feet of Chemflex hose or gum rubber hose on the front, and you've got some in between the debris body and the turret.
Yep.
Okay, so you're replacing maybe 7 feet of hose once in a while.
Right.
Whereas you get a rear-mounted one, if the hose goes, you're replacing 35 feet.
Yeah. And it's an extendable, so that hose is extending and retracting.
So you're gonna have more expense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at 100 foot, it's about $100 a foot on the gum rubber hose. So it's expensive.
Yeah, and it racks up over time too, especially if you're 100%. Using the truck a lot.
100%.
So it's just interesting to hear other people's perspective on it, because I tell my way and I have people that buy Hydrovacs with a front mounted boom and a rear mounted boom, but I tell you, 9 times out of 10, if somebody's just getting into it, they see all the other trucks that are out there. I have to have a rear mounted boom. I was like, okay, I just want to make sure that that you do need you don't have to get a rear mounted boom. No. There's benefits to it, but there's benefits to the front mounted boom side too, which I don't know if everybody's great about talking about it all the time. I feel like it's unpopular, but
a lot of the problem with the rear mounted boom is the fact that you've got an operator that's operating, and they're not paying attention, and they go down and they can kink the hose.
Yeah.
So as soon as you kink the hose, it doesn't recover. So now you don't have an 8-inch diameter hose. You got maybe the amount of flow that would go through a 4-inch diameter because it's kinked.
Yeah.
So now again, you're replacing 35 feet of hose.
And that's also saying that a kink doesn't mess up something with the rollers going back, or
there's lots of
little things that could happen.
Yeah.
No, but so all right, you go through, you become the dealer now, and you start selling trucks out of WestVac, and now, but recently you just became a dealer again for Vac-Con. When did you? I know that you just became a dealer again for Vac-Con. Well, it was recent though, in the past few years, right?
We started as a dealer for Vac-Con in 1997.
Yeah.
1998. We represented Vac-Con until about 2007, 2008. And we severed ties. And then 3 years ago, we came back to Vac-Con and represented them again.
Yeah. And we got some cheers from the applause in the background, but we appreciate you being on board. The past 3 years have been awesome. I know, this is the most we've talked before, which is cool.
Yeah.
It's a different dynamic to be able to sit down and have a chat like this. And, we appreciate you coming to town and doing this with us. It's great to have you on board. I know that's much more than 3 years strong, but, I've only been at Vac-Con for 4 years. So for me, I've known WestVac and the thing for 3 years, but I know that there's a background way before I was here, and it was cool to learn that history behind it, get a little bit of intel on the backside. Is there anything else that you wanted to point out or talk about while we were here? Or You
No,
good?
what's interesting, we have friendship with Vac-Con. It's getting close to 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, we've got, you know, friends in this room, you know, and it's kind of nice to have that legacy,
Yeah.
you know, and support. And yeah, we're excited about the future.
It's cool to have you guys out there, and we I'd say one thing that's super cool about it is you are one of the dealers that is the farthest geographical location from us that we treat as our kind of treat you guys as if it's a domestic thing being in Canada. You're the farthest reach from
We're
the factory.
international, though.
Yeah. International that we talk about being domestic, but it's from the farthest reaches that you come to travel. You're the one that's traveled the most to get down here for the dealer meeting. So we appreciate you coming in.
And just so you know, like 3 years ago, we sold a Vac-Con unit up into the Northwest Territories, and you know, it's winter out there right now. They're minus 30, minus 40, and they're operating.
Well, that's something, I'm not scratching this. We got to talk about this. I try to tell people these stories because Benoit Menard at CM tells these stories too about these harsh climates. So the truck right now, you said it's minus 40. Just to clarify, is this Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Well, it doesn't matter at that.
At that point,
It evens
it's
out.
freezing, right?
Yeah.
So it's that cold, and the truck is able. I'm sure that you guys have to do, obviously you're winter recirculating and winterizing the truck. But do you have to go through any other fail safes? Are you insulating anything, or is the
So
truck
we've done some additional winter recirc,
right?
some additional probably insulation on the lines. We've got a boiler on it.
Yep.
We tweaked it a bit.
What
for those
what do you mean?
environments.
What did you do extra winter recirc? Did you extra connections, or So you have the low pressure, high pressure, and the front rotor hose where they can recirculate any of those.
We add a manifold system on it so that all circuits will circulate.
Yep.
And you could air purge one or glycol one, and shut that off, isolate it, and then still work.
Is that something
hydrovac
that are you ordering the truck that way, or do you guys?
No, we do.
You guys
some
outfit it the way so that way. If I'm understanding it correct, because we do it a certain way where it really works well if you're doing the low pressure handgun, the high pressure handgun, the front rotor hose.
Right.
But you're doing it in a way where they can keep multiple things recirculating. Is that what you're, or having them open?
You
so
guys
that
are in Florida.
we don't have to worry about that.
You don't have to worry about it as
We're in
much.
the Northwest Territories. It's
So
different.
it's all about flow. It's all about the different zones.
Yep.
So it's a little different configuration,
Yeah.
but we get the job done.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, it's cool hearing that because I'll go visit somebody in Tennessee and they're like, "Well, it gets cold here." I'm like, "Buddy,
give them my number.
yeah. You want to talk to Gary?
Yeah.
You want to talk to Benoit?
Yeah.
You want to hear because Benoit's story? Benoit may have told you the story before, but about Alert Canada.
No.
Alert Canada. I'll put a little pop up on the screen if I feel like doing a little post editing here. But if you pull up Alert on Google Maps, I showed this to these guys. Yeah, it is Santa Claus's house. He's good. It is literally the North Pole.
Yeah.
I mean, it is as far so because
I didn't know he had a unit up there.
Yeah, so it's a I don't know if it's mining or if it's it's either mining or oil field, but it is so far north. I'll be in like Boston or Maine, and they're talking about that. I was like, all right, come here. I got to show you this. There's a truck here, and I'm zooming out, and I'm like, that all the way up there. It doesn't go all. Google Maps doesn't go all the way up there, but there's a truck there, and it runs. Now they modified it a little bit, but that's how cold these things can get. They're built to do this stuff. That's what they're meant for. Now, obviously, being in Florida, we rely on the experts that are living in the frozen tundra.
I don't
to do
even
this.
know if Vac-Con knows this, but they have a combo unit about 20 kilometers south of the Siberia border
Oh yeah,
in China.
that you sold, or yeah. So the Siberian border in China. So yeah, where is that? So Russia Siberian border. in China, so it's got to be cold as shit there.
I would say
So that's the northern portion of the continent.
as far north you go.
I'm playing my geography skills on me. So it's based. Yeah, it's
cold.
It's cold. Yeah. It's cold. But
yeah.
It'd be cool to see, because we have this thing at the plant of the international map, the national map, where they used to put these pins in them, and then they
I remember that.
Yeah, so they had these pins.
I
right?
never checked if they had one up there.
Yeah, we need to get a pin and put it in this South Siberian China area and make sure that this is documented, and put one up in alert too. Yeah. But it's funny because I take people on plant tours and we got this pin map, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they stopped this when I was like a 8th grader or a freshman in high school, because there's a lot more pins now, because the pins would be coming off the map. But, I just remember as a kid, my dad would be like, you can put a pin up. Put a pin up over here. There's one right here. And, I'd put a pin up and do it. And, I'm probably this tall. And I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But now, as a 32-year-old, I want to go put a pin in Siberian China, or South Siberian China.
I remember the rep at the time from Vac-Con says, "There's no fucking way I'm going up there."
Which rep was it?
I can't say.
Mike Palakia.
No,
his dad.
Before his time, yeah.
Sorry, Terry. Hey, we got to go to Algeria soon, Terry. You can come. No, again, we appreciate you coming on to the show and talking. I hope, it was a good time. I feel like, now I actually
know me.
Now I know you.
Yeah.
And now this is a really unique way to meet somebody, because you put these headphones on and we're locked in.
Yeah, we're zoned.
Yeah. I'm listening to what you're saying. You're listening. They were over here doing jumping jacks earlier. At one point, Palakia was laying on the ground over here. I don't know what the fuck was going on. But me and you, we're listening to each other because we're tied in right now.
Yeah. Totally.
This is a way to have a conversation with somebody to where there's really not a way to mess it up. We're talking. It's like the cameras aren't even on, and we get to have a cool conversation. And that's why I enjoy doing this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
And the people that listen to it, they can gain probably just as much knowledge as I did. I learned a lot talking from you on all sides of things, so I appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Gary.
All right.
Take
care.